There's no denying it, Europe is one of the most expensive continents to travel around, especially with the recent rise in prices. But luckily, I am just back from a 4-month backpacking trip across Europe, and I thought I'd let you in on some of my secrets on how to travel Europe cheap. Starting with a basic but necessary tip, and that is to bring a reusable water bottle with you. So many major European cities have free water fountains scattered around the place, which means you'll be saving yourself €3 to €4 every few hours when you need to stay hydrated. ATM machines that are in all the major European cities, and they quite literally flash at you to try get you over, but usually it costs €4 to €5 to take cash out from them. Instead, I recommend finding a bank, seeing if there's an ATM attached to it, and they usually have much cheaper withdrawal fees. Next on the list is accommodation. So I recommend staying in either hostels or Airbnbs, depending on your travel style. If you're a solo traveler, then hostels are the best way to meet friends and travel Europe affordably. You can stay in dormitories, but you can also stay in a private room. It's going to be a little bit more expensive, but a lot more affordable than hotels. Anyone who does want to stay in hostels, I do have a blog post in the description down below featuring all the hostels that I stayed in my trip. Some of them I absolutely loved and some of them not so much. So if you're looking for advice, that's definitely a good blog post to check out. If you're traveling in a group of friends, then Airbnbs are a great option because you can split the cost of the Airbnb by the amount of people that you have in your group. And that brings us on to our next tip, which is try to cook some of your own food. I found this handy dandy lunchbox on Amazon, brought it before my trip. I had 3 of them in total, and it literally folds down to this size, and then you can open it up, pop it out, put your food in it and store it in the fridge. If you are going to be eating out in restaurants, it's obviously going to be a lot more expensive. I do recommend checking out some street food vendors because a lot more affordable food and sometimes equally as delicious. Okay, tip number 5 is choose your mode of transport before going on your trip. So there are so many different ways to get around Europe, and some of it is quite affordable. You have train travel, bus travel, budget airlines, blah blah cars, Ubers, the list is endless, but obviously they all add up eventually. Personally, I used Interrail and then Flixbus to get around. And a lot of people will argue that a rail pass that you pre-buy is more expensive than buying individual trains. And yes, I will agree to an extent if you pre-plan your trip months in advance. However, Interrail gives you the flexibility to kind of travel around freely and also not spend a huge amount of money. I personally got a continuous pass. I used it to get from A to B and also for day trips, and it cost on average €6 per day. So honestly, very budget friendly and a nice, fun, beautiful way to get around Europe. Flixbus is also a great way to get around if you're looking for something even more budget friendly, because some buses can be equivalent of like €6. But just know it takes a lot longer to get places and it's just not as comfortable. Personally, I prefer comfort over, saving €1 or two. And that brings us on to tip number 6. If you do decide to travel by train, there are 2 different types of trains you can get: high-speed trains and regional trains. High-speed trains are far more expensive because you always have to book a seat reservation. Where regional trains, they're a lot cheaper to get around. It does take you longer to get to the destination, but you have beautiful views on the way, and they're usually included in a rail pass system like Interrail, where you don't have to book a seat reservation. So that's definitely one to go for if you're trying to save some money while traveling around Europe. Okay, and finally, if you are again going to be using trains to get around, night trains are a nice affordable way to do that, because basically you're paying for your train ticket and also your bed for the night in one go. So it's a nice affordable way not to have to pay for accommodation that night and wake up in a brand new country or a brand new city. Again, quite cheap if you're using the Interrail pass. And if you are curious about how night trains work, I do have a video on my night train experience, so that's a good one to check out. Tip number 8 is walk as much as possible. Most European cities are quite walkable, and it saves you so much money. You could end up spending €10 to €15 a day just getting around in public transport. So try walk if you can. It's the most affordable way to get around a city, and you never know what you might stumble upon. Okay, tip number 9, and this might be one that you're like, how does this save me money? But packing light saves so much money, I promise. First off, if you're going to be getting budget airlines, bringing a 10 kg carry-on bag is a lot more affordable than bringing a 20 kg under the hold bag. And then another thing you might not think about is getting from A to B with your luggage. So if you bring a light backpack, it means you can walk from your accommodation from the train station or the bus station. You usually last about 30 to 40 minutes with a backpack on if it's light. However, if you have a heavier backpack, you're going to be opting into getting Ubers and public transport, which of course bunks up the cost of traveling around Europe. Okay, tip number 10, be mindful of your budget before you go. So this might seem like a simple one, but before you set off on your trip to Europe, make sure you have a budget in mind, maybe a lower tier and a top tier, and hopefully you'll spend in the middle. It just means that, you have an idea on how much you want to spend a day, and it just means you won't go over budget, and it's going to be a lot more affordable trip that way. If you're curious on how much it costs to travel around Europe, I do have a video on how much I spent on my 4-month trip, so be sure to check that one out. If you are looking to stay on top of your budget, but not be too anal by keeping a spreadsheet or something, having a good bank card system is a great way to start. I recommend Revolut. It keeps track of all your spending every day and tallies it up and tells you how much you spent. It also has a budget tracker in there. You can tell it, I want to spend €2,000 a month. And when you're getting close to spending over that or getting close to that range, it will notify you. And it also has great exchange rates for currencies. They currently have a promotion on as well. If you order a card, you get it for free and cashback of €10. So link in the description to that deal. Okay, so tip number 13, and that is SIM cards. So how to get your phone to work while in Europe. Luckily for me, I'm Irish and my phone just works as normal anywhere in the EU. But unfortunately for international travellers, that is not the case. And I met so many friends while they were travelling where they purchased their SIM card in the airport or train stations. Don't do that. It costs so much more money. You're better off waiting until you get into the city and finding a local Vodafone store or other phone network that country offers and buying your SIM from then. If that country is in the EU, in theory, that SIM card should work all over Europe as long as you're in an EU country. So, good thing is just wait till you get to the city. It's a lot more affordable. Okay, tip number 14 is one that I'm kind of sad to give you, but if you are traveling in peak season, I recommend pre-booking your accommodation. I found out the hard way that it is not possible to be easy breezy and flexible. That's how I like to travel, but unfortunately the hostels were just getting more and more expensive the closer I got to the date, and about a month in I panicked and pre-booked everywhere. Most hostels, if you're booking through Hostelworld or bookings.com or Airbnb or hotels, they have free cancellation up to 48 hours beforehand, so you can still be a little bit flexible but not fully flexible. But it is a lot more affordable to pre-book your accommodation if you're traveling on the peak months. Which brings us to our next tip. If you do want to have an affordable holiday and you don't want to pre-book all your accommodation and you want to have complete flexibility, travel in the off season, it's a lot more affordable. Once you're not there in peak summer, you're going to be able to be a little bit more flexible with your time and a little bit more flexible with your money. So off-season travel is honestly such a fun way to go. I was in Croatia in May and everything was a fraction of the price that it is in summer, which is amazing. Before we dive into the next tip, I just want to say thank you so much for watching, and I would really appreciate a big thumbs up, like or comment, or even a cheeky subscribe. It really helps my channel to grow. Tip number 16 is Eastern Europe versus Western Europe. Obviously, it is considerably cheaper to go to Eastern European countries. That's what I decided to do. I tried to stay out of the West as much as possible because it is far more expensive. Eastern Europe is such a beautiful place to explore, along with Central Europe, Southern Europe, but once you get to the West and the Nordic countries, far more expensive, and you're going to have to increase your budget. Which brings us on to the next tip. Be mindful and be aware of the cost of each country that you want to visit. So if you want to keep your trip nice and cheap, don't go to places like Amsterdam and expect to spend, €20 a day. It's not going to be possible. So you just have to be mindful and be flexible. You can still visit Amsterdam, but just know that it's going to be considerably more expensive than visiting the likes of Krakow in Poland. And that brings us on to tip 18. So be mindful of your route before you go. I'm not saying you have to completely plan it, especially you're in the off season and you don't have to pre-book accommodation. But there's no point deciding to do Italy and then go up to Poland and then decide I'm going to go to Switzerland and then be like, oh wait, I want to go to Croatia, because they're jotted all over the continent, and it's going to be a lot more expensive getting trains from all different places instead of doing a nice planned out route. And it's a lot more affordable if you're traveling a shorter distance. Okay, next is don't just visit cities. So yes, Europe is famous for its amazing, beautiful cities, but there's also some incredible landscapes right on the doorsteps of some cities too that you can go visit, and accommodation in those places are a fraction of the price. For example, I visited Zakopane, Annecy in France. I went to Plitvice National Park in Croatia, and all these beautiful locations, the hostels were basically half price compared to the cities. So that's a good way to save money and also get out of the cities and have a little bit of a nature break. Okay, next is be familiar with some discounts that you might be able to get. So student rates, under 25 rates in Europe, often there's loads of discounts for that. If you have an Interrail pass, there's usually tons of discounts you can get with Interrail. One of my favorite was the 10% discount that you get with Get Your Guide, which means that you can book loads of tours with 10% discount off, which obviously saves you loads of money. Tip number 21, and that is free walking tours. Do not underestimate them. They are packed with knowledge, so much fun. You might make a new friend while you're doing them, and they're free. So perfect way to save some money while you're in Europe, but just don't forget to tip the guide, because they deserve a little bit of a thank you, but obviously it is much more cheaper to just give them a 5 or 10 euro tip than pay for a 40 euro tour. Tip number 22, this is mostly for those solo travelers watching, but try to make some friends. When you make a group of friends in a hostel and you're going out in cities together or on the coast, it's a lot more affordable to split the cost of things. For example, in Hvar, we spent 17 euro each on a boat for the entire day between 5 people. In the Czech Republic, I met people in my hostel. We decided to rent a car together and go to a national park. There's so many different ways that you can divide and split that cost between friends. In Lake Bled, I made friends and we ended up cooking dinner together every single night. So our dinner was costing like €1 each a day. So a lot more affordable to make friends and split the cost that way. And tip number 23 is to do with alcohol. I do understand when you're traveling, you're going to want to go out and party and meet people, but just be considerate on how much money you're spending on alcohol, because it really does add up. Personally, I'm not a huge drinker, so I didn't spend a huge amount on that, but I did meet people while traveling that were spending 10 to 20 euro a day on alcohol because they liked to party every night. Now, I'm not saying party every night is not something you can do, but there is also affordable ways to do it. Don't go to the nightclubs, don't go to the bars, buy a few drinks in the supermarket, have the drinks in the hostel, and then maybe you can go to a bar and nightclub afterwards and buy one drink, but you're doing it in an affordable way. And last but not least, the final tip, prioritize what you want to do. It's all well and good to say, I'm going to go to Europe and I'm going to travel so cheap and I'm going to spend 40 euro a day and that's it. I'm going to be so strict to myself. But the reality is you're in Europe. It's a once in a lifetime opportunity to be traveling around. So don't stump on experiences that you really want to have. Go kayaking if you want to. Do that day tour that you really wanted to do. Don't be so strict on your budget that you're going to regret missing out on opportunities that are fun and exciting. Because, as I said, it's once in a lifetime, and yeah, have the best time that you can. This brings us to the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed, and if you did, you might like my how much I spent on my Europe trip video next. As always, thank you so much for watching, and don't forget to like, comment and subscribe. See you in the next one. Bye!